that the prices that consumers pay are higher than they would be if those companies were not vertically integrated?
So my research on Medicare Part D...
Give me an answer.
Partially.
What do you mean partially? They're either higher or they're lower. You know, you're good at it, and I know your job is to protect PBMs, and I might tell us I don't think PBMs are the only ones at fault, but you don't have unclean hands. With respect, Mr. Scott, your definition of a fiduciary is wrong. A fiduciary isn't somebody that controls the decision. You know that, and I know that.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Liberty Watchtower, where truth takes center stage. Here, we keep you informed, engaged, and thinking critically in a world that often demands it. If you're new to the channel, like this video, subscribe, and tap the notification bell to never miss a dose of real, unfiltered truth. Now, let's dive in. Originally designed to help insurers and employers manage drug costs, PBMs now sit at the very center of our nation's prescription drug supply chain. And over time, they've become less of a watchdog and more of a power broker. Today, just 3 companies, CVS Caremark, Express Scripts, and Optumrx control roughly 80% of the PBM market. That's not just market dominance, it's market control. And what makes this even more concerning because these companies are vertically integrated. That means the same corporations that manage your drug benefits also own the pharmacies you use, and in some cases, even the health insurance plans you rely on.
Thank you, Senator Cohen. Senator Kennedy.
Professor Sood, as I understand it, 80% of the PBM market is controlled by 3 companies, 3 PBMs, that are vertically integrated. Is that right?
That is correct.
Does your research show that the prices that consumers pay are higher than they would be if those companies were not vertically integrated?
So my research on Medicare Part D...
Give me an answer.
Partially.
What do you mean partially? They're either higher or they're lower.
So
there's no such thing as a partial price.
What I find is that Medicare Part D premiums are higher as a result of vertical integration.
Okay. Well, then why don't we, I'm all for transparency, Mr. Chairman, I want to say that. But why don't we skip the foreplay and go right to the sex and outlaw vertical integration for Part D? Would you accept an amendment to your bill like that?
I don't want to answer that question right now because I want to study that.
Would you support that, Mr. Scott? Let me just guess what your answer is.
No, sir, and I can explain why.
No, you speak Sanskrit. I mean, I'm sorry. You know, you're good at it, and I know your job is to protect PBMs, and I might tell us I don't think PBMs are the only ones at fault, but you don't have unclean hands. Professor Sood, you say PBMs ought to be fiduciaries. To whom?
To both the plan and their members.
Well, what if the plan and the members' interests diverge? Who are they fiduciaries to?
Ultimately, in principle, they should be fiduciaries to the members.
Okay.
So, for example, ERISA makes...
I get it.
Okay.
I get it. Mr. Chairman, again, why don't we skip the foreplay and go right to the sex? Why don't we just amend your bill to require that PBMs have a fiduciary obligation to plan members?
Well, I think that's been suggested, and I think there's part of that in our legislation, but probably not fully enough to satisfy you.
Well,
so let me look at what you want to add to it.
Okay. I mean, I'm not criticizing your bill. I don't want my office to end up in Bethesda. So I'm not criticizing your bill. I like transparency. but we're just nibbling around the edges here. And with respect, Mr. Scott, your definition of a fiduciary is wrong. A fiduciary isn't somebody that controls the decision. You know that, and I know that. A fiduciary is somebody who has a legal obligation to give his client the best advice and to do what's best for his client. It doesn't replace agent with principal or vice versa. You know that, and I know that. Well, you need to talk to your lawyers. I may be wrong, but I doubt it. Let me go back to Professor Sood. Tell me 2 things you would do tomorrow to fix PBMs and result in lower prices for consumers.
So I think the 2 things I would do is...
Very specific.
Yes. I would implement price transparency so that everyone knows what they're paying. And
Okay, price transparency just tells us who's screwing up.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then the fiduciary responsibility says, if you're getting screwed, I can take you to court. So I would do those 2 things. And those are, I think, better than banning particular practices, because otherwise it's whack-a-mole. You ban spread pricing and something else will show up a year from now.
I got 29 seconds. Do you have any other suggestions? I appreciate your straight talk.
The other thing we can do is, what I recommended is pass-through of rebates to patients.
Now ask yourself, how can a company serve both sides of the deal and still act in the patient's best interest? This is not just a theoretical question. This arrangement has real consequences for real people. Premiums are rising, especially in Medicare Part D. Out-of-pocket costs for patients are climbing, even when drug manufacturers offer rebates. And too often, the savings don't reach the person at the pharmacy counter. They're absorbed somewhere in the black box of rebates, clawbacks, and spread pricing. During our recent hearing, we heard from Professor Neeraj Sood, who made the case for stronger transparency and fiduciary responsibility. He told us that patients are often paying cost-sharing amounts based on the inflated list price of a drug, not the discounted price that the PBM pays. That's not just unfair, it's unethical. And if you ask me, it borders on fraud. When a cancer patient is paying 10% of a $50,000 price list for a drug, when the real price, after rebates, might be $10,000, that's not a discount. That's exploitation. So, let's be honest with the American people. This isn't about efficiency anymore. It's about profit. And while there are many players in this system, from manufacturers to insurers to providers, PBMs are uniquely positioned to either serve the patient or serve themselves. Right now, too often, they're doing the latter. That's why we must go beyond soft reforms. Yes, transparency is important, but sunlight alone won't fix this.
So suppose a drug...
Say that again?
So pass-through of rebates to patients. So for example, the list price of a drug is $50,000, but the rebate on the drug is $40,000. So when a patient is paying cost sharing, suppose 10%, they should be paying on the post-rebate price. So which is the $50,000 less the $40,000 rebate. Right now what's happening is patients are paying cost sharing on the $50,000. So this would immediately lower patient out-of-pocket costs. So as Dr. Kircher said, for the cancer patients...
So you're saying the number after us, the PBMs are jacking up, are encouraging manufacturers to jack up the list price so they can jack up their rebates.
And that...
Is that right?
Yes.
That's illegal.
And the jacked up...
That's illegal.
Yes. I don't know about that, but it...
I do.
Okay.
It's illegal as hell.
Yeah.
Before I call on Senator Ronald, want to remind my members we got to vote and they're enforcing the 30-minute rule. So
It's time we ask, why are we allowing companies to be both referee and player in the same game? It's time we consider ending vertical integration. It's time we require PBMs to be fiduciaries legally bound to act in the best interest of the people they claim to serve. And it's time we make sure that rebates go where they belong, into the pockets of patients, not into the ledgers of corporate middlemen. Because the truth is, if a system allows you to profit more when the list price goes up, it's not a market, it's a racket. The American people are tired of being told that complexity is an excuse for inaction. They want fairness. They want transparency. And above all, they want relief at the pharmacy counter. So let's give it to them. Let's stop nibbling at the edges and take a bite out of the core problem. And let's remember who we work for, not the middlemen, not the lobbyists, but the patients.